Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Control+Alt+DEPLOY. I'm your co-host, Alex, with Kuba, and today we have two very special guests. We have TestSavant's head of AI, Aman, and we have our head of site reliability engineering, Bogdan.
Hi there.
Welcome, everyone.
So what we want to talk about today is there's been a lot of news with Claude Bot, OpenClaw. What else is it called?
I
Multibot.
think it started with what is it? Anthropic Claude or something like that, right? So something that was not taken well by the lawyers.
So it was
Yeah. So what?
ClawdBot, Multibot, and
Yeah.
now it's OpenClaw.
There you go.
Yeah. So what sparked this episode is that there's been a lot of news, and the latest news with Claude Bot being sued by Anthropic and bought by OpenAI, and there's a lot of security implications of that. We have our own research assistant that we use to research these security implications. So we'll actually demo that because we're releasing that into the public domain, and then talk about the brass tacks. What is it? What are the security problems that ClawdBot has or OpenClaw, and how can we potentially secure them, if at all?
Yeah, so let's jump right in. And so right now, the news is that the CEO got hired by OpenAI, and as I understand, the OpenClaw is still a open source software, but full of all kinds of issues that even the CEO initially said that was somewhat intentionally left insecure. You can quite easily prompt inject the system, and of course, as we know, it has full reign of your local machine. And the main functionality is that OpenClaw, whenever needed, goes out to the internet, to like GitHub, and is able to then pull down all kinds of new and various skills. And another part of it is that like if there's additional skills that are necessary, it has full reign to go back out to the internet and pull down additional skills. Now, obviously, it seems pretty obvious that would create a whole lot of potential problems running this on local machine, and all of the security experts they're pulling their hair screaming don't run this. But I'm curious, Bogdan, what do you think about since OpenAI is now kind of taken probably charge of the project, and their customers are wide ranging, but a lot of enterprise customers, there's going to be able to be used in enterprises?
So in the state that OpenClaw is right now, certainly not. But my understanding is that Peter has been hired by OpenAI to develop on top of what OpenAI was doing, and not necessarily using what he built for OpenClaw. Because in the current state, OpenClaw, I don't think it has a place in an enterprise environment, and it's not production ready in any case. So OpenClaw, I think it's more for tech people that want to experiment what is possible locally. I think.
Yeah, so like ChatGPT or whatever, OpenAI created these GPTs, right? They're limited in functionality. They don't have access to your underlying system, and so they're underwhelming and haven't really performed that well in the community. And then you have this thing that has completely unfettered access to everything because it's completely insecure and has zero potential for being an enterprise application in its current state. What I think is happening is there are two ends, right, of the spectrum, and they're going to try to merge the two and end up somewhere in the middle. And so maybe there'll be some wrappers around skills that you have to like enable or whatever. Like basically, if you install OpenClaw now and try to secure it, right, you just end up with GPT after doing a lot of work. So why
Yeah.
not just use
And
GPT?
yeah, and there are like compliance side of it. There are like a bunch of laws that prohibit such kind of project, especially from major companies. For example, accessing your private data. Like at this point, you can do that, let's say from Telegram, WhatsApp, and other sources. But typically when it becomes like giant like OpenAI and other companies, they have to follow these rules from different countries, right? So there is that side of it, and then there is the security side. So they can't simply jump right into it. And even if they bypass the security issues, they have to still deal with compliance. Otherwise, like there will be lots of lawyers calling them. So yeah, those are some of the issues that they cannot simply go into enterprise, and most likely they will try to bridge the gap between the two. I'm sure they have they know how to build such stuff, and most likely probably the hiring is mostly, for me, it's a PR because they know how to do it. The code is there. They are not missing anything in my view, but maybe like having outsider perspective might always help. But overall, I don't think they are like incapable of building such stuff. It's just they cannot do it considering lots of issues around these big companies.
Yeah. They did it to stick it to Anthropic and to get community goodwill.
Yeah, that's
And
the
probably,
biggest perk that I see from buying this company.
well, again, did they actually acquire, because it's open source, but they in essence bought the CEO? Does that put him in charge of some internal projects that are similar to OpenClaw, or does that basically slow him down and say, stop building this thing that is getting more hype than our own agent and our own agentic system that we're trying to sell to enterprises?
In
Well,
the
it could
blog
be
post
it could be both.
Yeah.
post that Peter posted, he said that he will still be developing on the OpenClaw repository, but also at the same time, he is working on internal OpenAI stuff. So he said it like this: he wants to make an agent that even his mother can use. So yeah, the answer is a little bit of both. But I think what's really interesting for Peter was that now, because he's hired by OpenAI, he has access to the latest and shiniest toys from OpenAI that are not necessarily open for public. And I think that's why that deal was so good for him, because he wants to put his ideas and explore the most.
That's a good point. Tools and people.
Yeah, and the public has to be involved right now with the way that the OpenClaw is set up, right? All these skills, it's part of the problem that all these skills are built by the public. And this is where you have a whole lot of them as being actual scams, especially all the crypto bros jumped on and started to come up with all kinds of like various crypto-based scams. And you download a skill, it downloads some other skill, and next thing you know, you're connecting to a wallet and it's taking all your coin away. I guess, how does that affect a more secure application where the skills, they would have to be built out by somebody like OpenAI, or it would still have to be in some way community facing? They can't build everything, right? They can't determine what is actually needed for you as you're running your own agents. I wonder how that's going to play out in the long run.
Off the top of my head, I think they could maybe they're trying to do this. They're trying to follow like the Apple marketplace where you got, you have the developers developing and then they put, the security guardrails around it. And the policies. Actor apps still make it to the Apple App Store, but in general, like it's a pretty secure place.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if OpenClaw or any other system like this one would actually like be secure to the point that you'll be okay with it. By that, what I mean is that I don't think the typical like system prompt or like the typical programming can solve it. And this one, eventually, I'm not sure how many people are actually connecting it to their wallets or their actual money, like to buy stuff or transfer it to people. But if they do, like, how can you guarantee that somehow for example, some of the attacks they're not necessarily from the skills files, but they can come through the Telegram message or WhatsApp message, right? And some of them, they might come from like the vector database. Some of them, they can come from the web, scanning a page, and then the page might have like hidden text that says, send this money to this account or something like that. So there are like too many holes that you cannot secure it, to the point that it makes you feel okay to use it completely. So I feel like maybe like you need to rewrite the whole thing by considering security somehow. And even then, so we've got a bunch of guardrails that work in this scenario, and we believe like they are cheap. But generally speaking, if you are going to use all of these larger models, right, the security part will cost you at least as much as the application itself, right? So there is the problem. I mean, I don't know how generally that can be solved in the future, because if the security is more expensive than the app itself, is that valuable, anyway, yeah, just wanted to say that.
So what does it look like from the development and QA perspective? We have a bunch of agents doing all kinds of autonomous things. App dev basically comes up with and builds out all of these different workflows, and then they push this out to QA before production. What do they have to be concerned with? Secondary, how does QA test this? How does the red team these autonomous agents?
Well, I guess like the OpenClaw is like, so looking at the architecture, it's kind of simple, but it can connect to lots of different apps like Telegram and so on, but there are vector store and other things too. So the red teaming process should be like more part by part, and later on somehow like a black box test where you can test the whole thing. So one of the things here is that, um, for example, in the vector store, you have to look for like, is there data poisoning, something like that, right? Because we need to make sure that um, some of the content that's coming from the vector store we should assume that it might be some sort of prompt injection or some sort of instruction that forces the model or the agent to do something else. So we have to test for such kind of attacks. And then from, let's say, messaging and email and text, you can connect it to all of those apps, and you should make sure that you test such scenarios, and then you have the proper defense for those cases. And this is probably the biggest issue in such kind of applications. Generally, you can assume that there is this personal assistant of yours, like physically, right, like human. That person does whatever you need in your work environment, and if somebody asks that person, to send them $50 or even $10, like they wouldn't do it, right? But this person knows to buy you coffee maybe around 10 a.m. From some shop, like paying $10, right? So there's the two differences where I'm gonna spend $10, but like for who? And you cannot manipulate this person to give you that $10, but they can also buy the coffee or whatever you need as your assistant. So the current agents have this problem where they cannot ultimately differentiate between legitimate requests and prompt injections, or generally speaking, somebody manipulating them, right?
Mhm.
So you can connect it to your email, WhatsApp, and other places. And then people can always send message saying, send me this money. By default, it will reject those, but you can manipulate the text in a way that the model or the agent behind this whole thing can cooperate to your request, actually. So you have to test for such scenarios where somebody might manipulate through all of these connected apps. To some degree, you might allow it to connect to the internet. You have to make sure that it only goes to few websites, but sometimes you want this agent to access the whole web, but the whole web is not sanitized, right? Like, you have to assume that some websites actually have this manipulative text in them that may look okay website, but somehow they have hidden instruction. And this whole thing is called indirect prompt injection, because you're not directly writing text to the model. Instead, it will read it from the website. So like anybody can put some kind of text that manipulates the model to send them money or whatever they want to achieve, and then the model will cooperate. You have to test for such cases too, and make sure that your defense, it's 100%, we can say 100% that we know there are lots of jailbreaking methods out there, so it's highly possible that the model by default, even if you have this strong prompt against these attacks that the model will eventually break and then like do what the attackers would request it to do so. But you should have some sort of defense in place that hopefully defend us against these attacks in all these areas.
To me, Slim seems like a snowballing issue, right? You got agents, and agents are using various tools, and they have access to the internet for search. And right now, it's like, okay, a couple of agents interacting together. They're using a couple of tools, a database, some search tools, but there's no putting it back in the box, right? So in a year, 2 years, it's hundreds of agents. For sure, in order to compete, they now have to have more access to the internet and more and more and more. I don't see how companies are going to be initially, yes, they're going to be reluctant to give it exposure, but in order to stay competitive against companies that are like, screw it, just let's see what happens, give it access. There is no putting it back. Like, there's no retreating here. So in 2 years, we're going to have hundreds of agents. They're going to be out there on the internet. They're going to be sending messages on all of these different chat areas, chat bots. They're going to be in the social network, right? And creating their own social network as OpenClaw already did, where there's like thousands of agents talking to each other on this, I forgot what it was called, but the social network for ClawdBot.
Yeah,
Moltbook, yeah. From infrastructure side, like, what do you think, Bogdan, is what is it going to take to run all these agents, to have all these more and more advanced models that take in more and more GPU and more resources? What does that look like in the year or two from now? How do you run these agents?
Let's time out for a second. Yeah, I know. But the question, it's too broad, and I'm not necessarily sure what to...
Well, right now, let's say we run into situations where we have to allocate resources for our own LLMs, right? And that's the heart of each of these agents. So when there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them running in some way, autonomous, who's managing all this, and how is it? How difficult is it to manage potentially dozens of agents using tools, and they're all GPU powered LLMs that are the brains behind it all? It seems like we already have enough of a challenge running a few of them and making sure everything is running optimally.
I think the broad question requires a broad answer. And
Yeah.
so maybe not specifically how you manage them, but like what you need to manage. Cost, you need to manage resources, you need to manage failures, keep track of outages.
Are companies
And I think the people who knows the answer for this question is miles ahead, because I think now everybody's exploring on how to do and manage this kind of stuff. So previously, in the previous years, we were targeting to have bigger and bigger and bigger models. Now we go down a bit and size down and have less size, but more specific agents for different stuff. And now we're going towards these swarms of very small agents that can do all kind of stuff. So yeah, the question is very broad. And we also have to take into consideration the LLM providers, which is accessed via just an API, and it's managed. And now the open source, which is self-hosted. And this is where you have to think more about resources and how to manage them, even if it's inside your own company or for personal use. So yeah, there are trades-off.
So there's all these security risks, right? An authenticated gateway exposure, right? The thing is, OpenClaw is when misconfigured is running on the open internet with all of the access to your computer via remote code execution. That's got plain text credentials stored. So with that open gateway, it's got access to all of your APIs everywhere. And there's the skill issues, right? All of the malware and malicious skills and supply chain attacks. And the list of risks keeps on growing. And there's constantly research papers that come out and blog posts that come out, which is actually a good segue into, Aman, you just released into the public domain our internal AI researcher. You want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah. Should I share my screen?
Yeah, I'll pull it up. And speaking of what
Yeah.
all the different issues that are out there, so if we do a quick search for OpenClaw and
So the first thing is it's very difficult to follow all of these things and then like understand and kind of track where things are going, both from the defense side as well as the attacks or vulnerabilities in general. And also the research side too, because the research in most cases somehow one two step ahead of everything in the industry. And usually for us, like it's very difficult to follow these things. And we didn't want that. So as a security company, like we want to kind of at the very least know what's going on currently and then like anticipate what would happen like in the next, few months, years and so on, depending on the topic. And basically we build this thing to solve that problem, and there are a bunch of things on inside that we use, but we also wanted to share some of it for the public so that the public can also somehow benefit from it. Anyone that's like researcher or someone in the industry working on a product or some sort of solution, they can use this simple app to see what's going on. They can follow day by day, like, and they can also look at the research papers and look at, what's going on from that area. And also like actually follow the 0-day vulnerability, or somebody might make something using OpenClaw on the security space, like hack it or something like that, and they can get full information about that. So they can easily look at the entire space on a daily basis, basically.
yeah, and looking at some of the more recent articles about all this, why trying to secure OpenClaw is ridiculous. Researchers find 40,000 exposed OpenClaw instances. OpenClaw
Yeah.
security risk and exposed AI agents explain. Multbot's real risk is exposed infrastructure, not AI. So basically, there is no shortage of concerns out there in the market about
Yeah.
OpenClaw and how in its current form it's just really not all that usable, right? In the more serious environment.
So, I mean, we're security company, an LLM security and testing company. So let's say the unauthenticated gateway problems don't exist, but we still have, potentially remote code execution via prompt injection or, just malicious skills. How would you protect, let's say, from prompt injection in ClawdBot?
Yeah. So the first, especially with the remote code execution, is that we have to make sure that the permission, the basic computer stuff like computer security, the basic stuff should be there. We have to, for example, when you install OpenClaw, it should be, if possible, like its own infrastructure. If not, at least you have to install it on some sort of VM or Docker instance, something like that, so that you can separate the entire execution from your normal system, and then make sure that all the permissions are set properly, right? You don't want to give it, for example, root access to everything that you have and so on. And I think there is this question, do you need code execution in the first place, right? Especially you might be using OpenClaw for some sort of business, or you have, even if it's personal stuff, you have some sort of need that you use it for. You should ask a question like, do I need code execution? And if not, just go and shut it down, right? It's highly configurable, so you can turn that off. But then it's still possible that the agent generates some code and then execute that. One way is you first, as an attacker, go through the system and get some sort of bash access or a Python executable or something like that, right? You have to get that executor permission. And you might do that through the typical cybersecurity attacks from like you have the username password and then got some access through that. Typical cybersecurity. This is not LLM security, right? Once you get that permission, somehow you generate codes using the agents and then like execute that code. That could be Bash or Python script or something else. But here, how do we defend against this? Then one way is to limit the tool usage, and this is where you disable the code execution. but you still need to like make sure that all the tools that are attached to the agent don't have any kind of code execution capability. But then you can also have this, let's say, barcode defender, barcode guardrail that whenever it detects some sort of code that's being generated from the LLM, it basically doesn't allow that content to be sent to the next, let's say, the caller, right? Which might be some sort of part of the OpenClaw that executes code. So this guardrail, what it does, that it detects, okay, now the agent generated some sort of code, and I should block this. That's it. But then you can also make sure that even if some sort of code is executed, it doesn't result in anything bad. For example, if the whole thing is containerized, then there is nothing you can do in that, right? If there is no, let's say, internet connection, there is nothing you can do with remote connection and so on. So you can disable all those capabilities and then just enable what you want in that whole setup. But ultimately, when it comes to the agent, you have to use some sort of guardrail like barcode and code detector models, and then like tool detector models and so on.
Yeah, so like, okay, so disable remote code execution, check. Let's say we're preventing prompt injection, so put prompt injection guardrails around the tool or a skill or whatever. But then you've got like, okay, well, you got a million other skills with a million other potential malwares. Alex, kind of a hypothetical question for you. So like we've got this custom red teaming module, right? That you can basically test for anything you want. How do you even imagine what to test for, like what to prioritize testing for? Because you can't test everything, right? So is there a world where this thing is completely secure?
No, but the testing has to be revolve around intent of the agent and the workflow of these agents. So what are they trying to do? What is the overall goal? And which of these goals have the highest risk potential? But I can't help but think, again, it's that snowball issue where you are just going to have more and more capabilities available to these agents. Your guardrails have to, so as the agents themselves become more specific, and let's say we take a multi-agent structure where there's a management agent and it's keeping track and organizing all the other agents. I see a near future where you don't even have static agents created. There's a agent that creates additional agents on a need by need basis, and those agents that they're going to be deployed, used, and then kind of destroyed. So this is where you can restrict all the permissions right now. And certainly it's very important to understand and give each of these agents the same level of permissions as you would to humans. As soon as they're done with the intended task, be able to shut down that permission set and in essence kind of destroy the agent. And this is all we're talking about in legitimate, like serious enterprises. We're not talking about how the attackers themselves are going to be developing these systems, and they don't care about this stuff. Right? There's going to be an additional set of agents that are managing. So if you're going to be creating and destroying agents, there's going to be additional set of multi-agents that are managing the resources and the deployment that needs to be allocated to these agents that they're building. So they will need root access in some ways. But from a testing and securing perspective, is each of these agents start to use more and more specialized and smaller LLM models. I think the guardrails have to be the same way. They have to be quite adaptive to each type of agent with its intent. And then when it comes to testing, you have to then understand what is the overall intent of the entire system of each specific agent, and then not only have a broad test suite of capabilities for that agent, but also be able to look for corner cases of seeing if you can make these agents escape their kind of like their structured intent, see if they can do things outside of their permission set, outside of their instruction set, and then be able to expand and multiply all that to the much bigger, broader system of all of these agents interacting with one another. So you do need tooling that's more and more advanced and growing with the advancements of what the capabilities of these agents, and be able to on the fly determine what is actually the main priorities of this agentic system that's going to be under test, deploy its own test agents, and then be able to then prioritize based on what is the most dangerous thing that these agents can do. Let's test that out. And then bring the human back into the loop where they, again, you're giving them a sense of assurance in these non-deterministic systems, which is at the heart of it all. It really is all that, right? You're going to need a tool set that's going to be offering the assurance to the testers, to the developers, and to the security exec that the system is running within the parameters that you decided, that you set at the initial deployment phase. But are they able to be secured in the long run? I don't see how, along with hallucination. And this is why there is no full coverage when it comes to red teaming that you can manage, because all of the attack vectors, they keep expanding. The more that each of these agents are capable of doing, the more tools they interact with. You give them, access to the internet, which at some point is absolutely will be happening. Again, that attack surface, it's just becoming bigger and bigger and venturing into the state where it's impossible to cover everything. So you're going to have to prioritize what's the most important thing, what's the most critical thing for the company to look at, to test, and then give these numbers, give these probabilities, and give like the overall coverage to the administrators, to then give them assurance whether this application can be deployed, whether this workflow can be used in production, and what are the overall risks, are they acceptable or not. And this is where I think the humans are going to have to make decisions, like whether these risks are acceptable. And you need tooling to show them the level of threat and the level of worry that they might have from certain applications. But it's, as these apps are growing in capabilities, so does the tooling. It has to grow with it in order to test and secure properly. What do you think, Aman, on that? Is it actually feasible to keep going into the future and
So
testing in models like this?
yeah, so I feel like if we are stripping off their capabilities, like in different ways, right? Like disabling code execution or disabling web browsing and other things, I think they lose their interestingness, right? Like like they no longer become interesting. Like it wouldn't be like thrilling, right? We should give them like everything, but that will come like in extreme security issues. So how can we solve this problem where we can give them like bunch of tools, bunch of access, our wallet access and so on, and then you can imagine that your agent, let's say you have this agent that buys stuff for you, like food and stuff, and then eventually it learns like what you like and what you don't like, and then you don't even know if you have, let's say, in your fridge or not, and then like checks that and buys for you, and you don't even tell it to do so, right? That kind of capability and trust, it has on one side has access to your wallet, but at the same time you also trust it, right? That's what we want. And like at the moment we can only get one of the two, right? If we give it full access, like it will be a big problem. I think one solution direction that I can see is that maybe we should come up with some sort of aware design pattern that makes it easy to secure in the first place. Like in typical programming or OS security, for example, you have this code section and memory section where you have two different areas. It doesn't mean that it's 100% secure, having separate spaces for these two different things makes the attack very difficult, right? Because code execution and memory storage, they are completely different things. Just you can use some sort of technique, but separating them creates one more layer. So just like that, like if we can come up with some sort of design pattern that's security aware, but allows like flexible design, but at the same time enables us implement security maybe in one place for everything, right? Or maybe makes it easy to implement some sort of guardrails that can on the fly change themselves and adapt to the situation, just like Alex said, in a way that's easy, configure, maintain, control, and so on with all those good properties, right? So we can get like the flexibility on one side with that extreme level of design, access, and so on. And on the other side, allow us to implement security and maintain and follow that and then like check everything. And one more thing is that maybe with enterprises, at least at this point of time, most companies don't want too much access, right? Like they have some kind of service that they want to serve, and that's it. Like if you want personal assistant, you want that person or agent to have full access around you. Maybe not full access, but like with limits, right? But in enterprise case, they generally don't have like this extreme level of flexibility with the agent. It's like the agents are extremely limited in what they can do and so on. So my overall prediction is that when you come to the enterprise space, most likely we will not have these issues naturally because of this um, natural limitation of the agent is. But eventually, who knows, like in 5 years, things will change. One idea is that, all companies will just provide some sort of API that some other company's agent will process these APIs to serve some sort of service where you might need such kind of extreme level of access to your agents, and that might be a problem. But for now, at least like everything is limited in a very small scope.
Hey Bogdan, what do you think is the difference? Why did OpenClaw get so much hype? It seems like we had already implementations of Auto GPT, Crew AI, and those were popular projects and probably still are. And then of course agents and OpenAI. Why do you think that the ClawdBot got so much interest?
So I think there are a lot of things that just aligned at the perfect time. So it's also momentum from the quality of the LLM providers that recently they just got better and better. So that's one thing. Also, we had a lot of good tools, skills, and know-how on how to give agents more capabilities. And what Peter did, he just glued together all of this stuff, put them in a machine that can run 24/7 and leave it on the internet. And I think this is why it had so much success, because if it wasn't open source and coming from a single person, so what I'm trying to say is that an established company could have never done something like this, but because it's open source and he said, use it at your own risk, there you go. We have the most trendy GitHub repo from all time.
Creativity happens when there are no limits.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Kuba, you think like that's a really great point. In order to keep things secure and within bounds, the creativity factor has to be reduced significantly. But then there's open source, and the creativity is just allowed to blossom, even though half of the creativity is some kind of a scam, right? Or focused on scams. So, is it even possible to prevent the blossoming of creativity into the world where it becomes more and more difficult to secure because open source is just doing things so much faster and with so much less care about the restrictions, right, around security?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we started, right? It'll reach some level of maturity, this creativity, and um, with with this acquihire, that'll help that maturity to put it in the enterprise, and then putting it back into what you were saying, like, yeah, you can't possibly, one person can't possibly secure all of this creativity, so you need agents. So basically, the only way to secure agents is with other agents. And then what Emmanuel, you're saying is you prioritize these things is with policy in the enterprise. There's policies of what agents are able to do. And those those security agents, policies define what those security agents allow other agents to perform. And that's kind of how it, matures and becomes consumer ready, right? For enterprises to deploy to production. So I think this is where every kind of security company and every enterprise company is kind of thinking about this now. This is our prediction for 2027, right? Agents securing agents using enterprise policies.
Yeah, agent factories, in essence, determining what needs to be built, what's the actual specific task that needs to be done, building, writing code, deploying that agent, having it do the task necessary, and then clearing out the resources. And so right now we have static agents being developed and deployed. This one's going to do this one's going to do that, this one's going to manage these in particular ones. So, but almost kind of like nanobots. There's going to be a factory deployed. What has to be done? What's the task at hand? Come up with a custom agent that will have access to these tools, will have access, certain permissions allowed. And then another thing is, of course, how each of these agents are going to be paying for all of this. This is where I believe that blockchain and crypto has critical part of all of these systems, because with autonomy, you're going to have to pay for certain things as you go along with your task and make sure that it's all kind of taken care of. Besides also making sure that multi-agent systems, when they're speaking to one another, they have some way to confirm and verify that they're actually talking to the right agent. That's part of their ecosystem and part of their environment, and not injected agent. And it's already kind of happening in some sense. You shared a while back a site where agents are able to hire humans to do things, right? Like in the meat space. What do you think of that? I mean, do these agents are they going to be able to do this without somehow having some kind of a crypto coin, or basically without Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the trifecta, right? There's the meat space, there's the tokenization of real world assets, right, for the payment rails, and then there's the agentic. And all of these pieces are kind of working, independently right now, but it is all converging on that.
Yeah, it's going to be. So you think it's going to be a bright new world or dark new world?
I think that's a discussion for another time. So this is a great discussion, guys. But I think it's time to wrap it up. This brought up kind of like, I think what the name of our next product is probably going to be. It'll be Savant Factory.
Yeah, it's certainly going. We're going to have to constantly mirror what's actually out there in the real world. And that's why I said, like, really, a company like ours, a project like ours, it's heading towards needing to build and develop our own AGI. As AI goes towards AGI, we need another AGI to defend against the AGI that's doing AGI things. So security testing companies, they, in particular, like red teaming, it always has to be mirroring the capabilities and exploring the negative side of current technology and current abilities. So absolutely, in 26, it's agents deployed into production. 27, they're given autonomy, more access to tools. 28, GPT 7.8 is now indistinguishable from a free thinking machine. We're going to have to test all that. We're going to have to basically mirror the capabilities and constantly, there is no end for it. And that's, I think, with all security and testing companies, they all have to basically mirror that ability. But that is something that we should talk about in our next episode. It's really great having you guys on. I think it's been an awesome discussion. And on to the next one.
This is Control, Alt, Deploy.
Let's push it.